Okay, well, thank you for joining today's webinar. We will be diving into a very topical topic today, and really specifically the power of enriched data and why social advertisers are basically raising their hand saying they desperately need it to maximize their ROI. So we're going to dive into all the ins and outs of enriched data today, what it means, what it translates to for marketers, and most importantly, what people can do with it. First and foremost, just a little bit about Unified. We provide global brands and agencies enriched, transparent intelligence and social advertising expertise on over $1 billion of social investments. The underlying infrastructure of that $1 billion of social investments that we provide intelligence on is enriched data. So we are very much experts in enriched data in the fact that it is the lifeblood of our entire platform. And we'll dive into exactly what that means today, but from a pipes into the system standpoint, we are one of only 5 companies in the world with direct API access to the big 6. That would be your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Snapchat. So we're talking about enriching data on a very broad social scale and how we can power that for marketers. So starting with enriched data and really talking about what it is. It's kind of one of those topics you hear can tend to be a little general when people use it to mean different things, but enriched data at its core is really about taking uncategorized data or raw data or unpolished data, raw data probably being the most common term, and doing something with it. You're enriching it so that someone on the other end can make it more usable or they can take action from it. So in this instance, let's take a very simple metric of uncategorized data that's pretty common for marketers, right? So for instance, let's say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Marketer, you got 20 conversions today. Congratulations. Now, without any kind of enrichment to that, it's really just a raw data metric. So you don't really know, is that good? Is 20 conversions amazing? Is it terrible? Where do they come from? Who are the converters? Really all of that who, what, where, when, and why about that piece of information is what the enrichment process brings to the table. So when we're talking about enriching those 20 conversions, it might look a little bit something like this. You can say, okay, well, 2 out of those 20 came from Instagram. They were for brand A in my portfolio, specifically on the fall sale carousel ads, being deployed by the digital team agency through the Facebook Power Editor from a solution standpoint, and targeting teens that didn't hit my goal. That's a lot of context added to just 2 of those 20 conversions. And it continues on, as you can see, the who, what, where, when, and why. Maybe these 3 conversions were from Twitter. They were also from brand A, but they were from a sweepstakes video ad deployed by an internal team through a Twitter partner, targeting moms, which beat your benchmark by 23%. And maybe the lion's share of those conversions, 15 out of the 20, came from Facebook for brand B on an evergreen app install ad that was deployed by the digital team agency through Facebook marketing partners, targeting teens, and beat your benchmark by 5%. So when we unpack that, we're not just saying, these conversions came from these places, for instance, Twitter versus Instagram versus Facebook, but it also came from what creative, it also came from what targeting, it also came from what team, it also came from what tool that team is using, because a lot of teams use multiple tools or test them in a bake-off. It also puts it in the context of your specific business. How is this doing in comparison to your goals, your custom KPIs, or your benchmarks? All of that is the context that enriched data in the marketing world brings to the table for marketers. And as you can imagine, without it, trying to make sense of what to do with your stat of 20 conversions that's raw becomes really difficult. It's not a very usable piece of information. So why marketers need enriched data to do their jobs more effectively? Unstructured data is the whopping amount of data out there right now. On a projection, 80% of all data is unstructured and unenriched. That is a lot of uncontexted data and information out there. It would be like trying to build a house without blueprints. All you have is just, here's your nuts, bolts, nails, hammer. Like, there's no game plan here. There's no context to, well, where does this nut and this bolt go, right? So this unstructured data is definitely a huge problem for marketers, and it's not being felt by a small subset of the landscape. or marketers out there. And this, of course, spans across brands, media agencies, strategy agencies, analytics agencies, creative agencies, consultants, executives, whatever it is. There's not one segment that currently is has amazing enriched data all of the time. Data quality obviously becomes a very important issue as well. And over half of marketers say that improving data quality is the most difficult obstacle to data-driven success. If you don't have quality in, you can't have quality out. And that's why it's important when you're talking to companies like us or other people who provide platforms or data solutions to not only look at the data coming in, do you have access to that pipeline? There's a fair amount of people out there that do. But then what are you doing with that data? Are you securely storing it and polishing it in a proper way and then ultimately enriching it to power better business intelligence or buying tools or general information gathering that people can make better decisions with? In an interesting poll, we were talking to marketers and they said, here's our top 3 data challenges. Here is 1, 2, and 3 right off the bat. And it was an overwhelming trend. Number 1, working with massive amounts of data. Not too surprisingly, the issue these days is not, hey, I don't have enough data. That maybe was the issue 20 years ago. Today it's, oh no, I have too much data. I don't really know what to do with it or how to make sense of it. So that was the overwhelming number 1 hand-raised problem pointed out by marketers when it comes to their top data challenges. And it's felt by a lot of different types of groups. Number 2 was, I have disparate data platforms that create silos. Data silos is a concept that you hear a lot about in the trades and the industry and just from talking to your peers these days. And it really is about creating walls around pieces of information, not only from an infrastructure standpoint, for instance, this information or this data point lives in this tool versus this other data point lives in this other tool, but also it, as a result, has a waterfall effect to the teams using it. And so without that cohesion and breaking down those data silos or centralizing them in a place where everyone can access, you create data silos for teams as well. And that's when you run into problems where one person on your team knows, how the campaign did, the other 14 don't. Or one agency knows, for instance, maybe the media agency is up to speed, but the creative agency is completely out of the loop on how the creative performance did. And in social, when you need to develop creative in a really quick, strategic fashion, that can really be the difference in driving big ROI for you. So the number 2 problem, disparate data platforms that create data silos. Those disparate platforms aren't going away, but it's the ability to kind of centralize all of those data silos from those disparate platforms in a single place. And that leads us to problem number 3. By far, number 3 was probably pretty logical and pretty commonplace for a lot of you in the webinar, the inability to create a cohesive view of performance from multiple sources. In other words, I don't have a view from the top. I have no way to kind of put my arms around all of this massive amounts of data that's coming from disparate data platforms inside of data silos to give me a sense of, can I look across all of it? And can I dive in at any altitude? Having a single view across the top is important. It's really important to kind of get a sense of your entire portfolio. But without the ability to then dive in, it's only about as impactful as maybe the first hour of your day. A lot of times you're investigating what's going well, what's not going well throughout the rest of your day. So these are the top 3 data challenges that we heard. And reporting, not too surprisingly for marketers, was another big pain point. Specifically, 80% of companies have no agreed upon approach or can only generate baseline measurements. And just saying the words baseline measurements, it's clearly not enough. In 2017, marketing and marketing aspirations are increasingly sophisticated. So from a reporting standpoint, it's very difficult to launch innovative, amazing campaigns if you don't have innovative, amazing reporting to justify it. And you don't have what I would call beyond baseline measurements to accomplish that. And then, of course, you have 82% still relying on Excel for performance management. Spreadsheets, it'd be crazy to think that they're going away tomorrow, but there are certainly better solutions or at least ways to augment your spreadsheet use. Sometimes you want to export to raw data and you still want to dig in for whatever creative project you're working on. As an Excel nerd, I call them creative projects. They might be boring to other people. But the point is, when you deal in exclusively Excel sheets, you become increasingly open to human error, which is rampant within Excel sheets. Speaking of silos of information, you might have an Excel sheet that lives on your desktop and your desktop alone, and it goes nowhere else. So having a centralized center that you could pull Excel from, but that everyone has access to, a centralized business intelligence platform, becomes critical for marketers to be able to report on what activity is occurring that much better. Multi-channel tracking is another topic that came up a lot. In fact, almost 99%, just shy there of a little bit, of marketers say that tracking campaigns across platforms is a huge top priority. And of course, in our world of social advertising, that means tracking platforms in a centralized place across these different walled gardens, a term that you might have heard about social. So Facebook is its own walled garden. Twitter is its own walled garden. LinkedIn, Snapchat, et cetera, the list goes on. And what that really means is they're native ecosystems with their quote-unquote walls up, but that means that all of the metrics, all of the tools, all of the pipes and the APIs in are proprietary to their garden. So a lot of times you're seeing, even in just the social space, marketers having no way to track campaigns across all of their different channels, because very rarely are people just deploying ads across one social channel these days. They're either testing or have tested and are scaling multiple. So tracking all of those campaigns in a single place across your entire portfolio, for all your brands, all your tools, all your agencies, very, very critical. And of course, while 82% cite spending insights a top priority, that's obviously secondary to just being able to get access to that multi-channel tracking. And collaboration or streamlining teams, or really just in layman's terms, getting everyone on the same page is a huge topic that we hear about all the time. And it seems like it's growing in increasing frequency month over month in every conversation we have with customers, prospects, peers, anyone in the industry. And here we have a stat, 95% of marketers wish their teams and agencies had full transparency into marketing signals and campaign performance. So that's an interesting stat about, hey, I don't even have visibility in, I don't have the transparency I need into what's going on to basically say, I understand what's going on, and now I can make an informed, intelligent decision about my campaign. I can optimize this ad, or I can shut down this creative, or I can ratchet up this audience, or I can learn from brand A and apply it to brand B in my portfolio. Any number of things. But that visibility in is not the end of the story. It's also about enabling visibility in for all of the players involved in what you might have heard as the social marketing supply chain. So supply chains are basically all of the partners, all of the entities involved in an enterprise. If you're thinking about maybe the auto world, right? The supply chain might be the people who produce the tires and the people who produce the windshield and the engineers who build the engine, right? Those are all components and pieces in the auto supply chain. In the social marketing space, same concept, but different players involved. You have the brand who's developing a strategy and who's obviously pushing goals down. You have the media agencies executing on that. You have the creative agencies developing creative to support that. You have the strategic or analytics agencies diving in and doing multivariate attribution and all that types of fun stuff. So really, when you talk about how do we create visibility, it's not just for individual groups, but for everyone in a brand-specific supply chain. And when you enable that visibility, you want to have some levers involved there. You don't want to just open the floodgates to everyone involved. There's generally a hierarchy to that. So the brands might have total access, and in a very simple example, maybe they only want to grant the creative agency creative performance and strip out any financials. So they might not see total budget spent, but they would see click-through rate or engagement rate or video view rate, right, if they're producing videos. Still really helpful information, and of course the brand could open it up to every agency, but having those levers involved is really, really important when you're looking at collaboration tools or platforms that allow you to connect in all of the supply chain pieces. So what marketers can accomplish with enriched data? We work with a lot of different clients across a lot of different verticals, auto, entertainment, CPG, telco, you name it. And we help them with a lot of different data enrichment stories. So we just wanted to highlight a couple of those here. First up would be a global beverage brand. So we work with this brand very much in a data enrichment standpoint and at a really crazy scale. This brand, before working with us, really had a need in the social marketing space to centralize and enrich all of their social marketing data, which was fragmented not only across brands, but across countries and brands that work on specific countries that work on specific brands. So in totality, they had 70 different sub-brands in their entire portfolio. When you think about, there's a lot of different beverages that roll up to a beverage holding company across 13 different countries. That is an insane amount of entities to not only collect and store, but enrich and actually provide that context of the who, what, where, when, and why, so that they can make important decisions. And to give you another kind of slice at it and a sense of scale, just looking at one brand in just the US, when you lift under the hood about, what are we really bringing together here? What is the scale of that? It was 26 different ad accounts and 7 different buying teams. So what that means is there were 26 different spend accounts in social, the baseline foundation of campaigns where the actual spend and the audience and the targeting is implemented. And there were 7 different buying teams touching just the campaigns for this one brand. They were different buying teams, different buying partners, different agencies, some handled internally, a pretty familiar story. But the ability to kind of suck in all of that and enrich it to power out the business intelligence to make sense of it all was a really, really big project we were really proud of. Different slice, and this is more on the collaboration track for a global auto brand. This was an interesting one where, very similar to what I described, they had a creative agency that was out of the loop, and they weren't really getting performance insights in a timely, digestible format. So probably pretty familiar. Maybe they were getting wrap-up reports, 6 weeks after a campaign ended, or quarterly business reviews, QBRs, every quarter that would kind of do a look back. And that's not really enough to inform intelligent decisions on making creative, as I mentioned in the social space, where you often need to be reactive and proactive and refresh creative more than you would say, certainly in an out-of-home or display world. So they were currently kind of facing a disjointed flow with fragmented intelligence, right? You had the brand working with the agency, the media agency, I should say, and the brand working with the creative agency. But by connecting everyone into our business intelligence platform and then pulling the levers, as I mentioned, being able to share different pieces with the right applicable teams, we created an optimal flow for them. And they were able to create that optimal connected or closed circuit flow across 3 years of performance data and $40 million in spend. So a huge data set where now everyone is reading off of the same page and really impacting ROI by actually making important decisions. So when you think about ROI, if I can optimize the click-through rate up 0.01%, that's kind of cool. But what really moves the needle is, I know a month ahead of time that this creative isn't working and I'm going to swap it out. That's what really moves the needle on campaign performance. Completely different story here, and very much about enriched data continuity, making sure that you have continuous access to it and there's no breakage from a brand standpoint. We worked with a global technology company, a consumer brand company actually, and really one of our oldest clients and one of our best clients really, they have changed agencies of record 3 different times over the 5 years of working with us. But because they have had that enriched data continuity in our platform, no information kind of left their purview or walked out the door with their previous agency, which is certainly an issue brands have faced in the past. Agencies go up for review and are swapped in and out on a regular basis. Seems like a more and more frequent basis these days. That's not going to change. But what brands really need to think about is, do I own and have access to all my data so that 6 months from now, if I want to look back on my holiday campaign and see how it performed, but I have a new agency, it's not a guessing game. I'm not digging through email archives hoping to get a sliver of what that campaign did. No, you can instantly access that in your centralized place. So across those 3 different agency of record changes, we maintained their data continuity for 5 years with $120 million in ad spend and across 30 different sub-brands in their portfolio. So when you think about the scale of that data continuity and that view from the top we talked about, very, very massive example here. And then obviously from an agency standpoint, we've talked about kind of a brand purview, but from putting our agency hat on here, specifically media agency, this is a really great example where we worked within a media agency to basically be their standardized business intelligence platform for their social advertising. And we actually kind of worked backwards with them and were able to calculate out, hey, before working with this type of platform, how many Excel sheets per year were you really juggling across all the teams that support all of your brands? And honestly, it's a very conservative estimate of 150. Realistically, it's probably about double that. But that is the amount of scale we're talking about, where you can imagine some of those Excel sheets live on people's desktops. Some of them have formula errors. Some of them have walked out with people who have left that agency. All of those pain points from an agency standpoint are alleviated when you leverage one single business intelligence platform across, in this case, all 16 of their brand clients. It gives the agency executives a view from the top, so you can actually see how your agency is performing. You can gauge kind of the overall health of certain teams and certain groups. And it also allows you to dig in and actually pull out the insights that will really wow and impress your clients, who, of course, have transparency to it as well. So ultimately, hopefully this was helpful. You got to learn a little bit about Enriched Data and get to see some example use cases. If you're trying to think about, okay, so what does Unified do? How do they fit in the Enriched Data standpoint? Here's a really helpful image. So in the 1, 2, 3 step process at its very simplistic nature, this is what Unified does. We collect your data with those direct APIs into the social channels like Facebook, Twitter, etc. We also pull in first-party data and third-party data, all of that data collected, and the middle layer is exactly what this webinar is about today, and enriched, adding that layer of who, what, where, when, why context, so that ultimately when it's put into business intelligence, you can actually get informed, intelligent reports that you can take actions on. And those come in the forms of lots of different things. It can be total social advertising transparency, something like an advertising dashboard. It can be enhanced investment management, thinking of your social advertising as almost like your investment portfolio. It can be complete analytics at any altitude, so you're not just seeing that view from the top, but you're also able to dig in at any altitude all the way down to one granular creative and one granular campaign. It also means deeper real-time audience analytics, which is a really robust output from this enriched data and this access to the social channels. And of course, streamlined connected intelligence. Being able to connect in all of the disparate pieces of your social supply chain into a centralized place, and not only, make sure everyone has access to it, but in a platform like ours, you can actually see the relationships between all of the working parties. So in this mock-up here, you can see it's actually our fictitious beer brand called Hank Lowenbrow, and you can see all of the different initiatives connected in, properties connected in, markets connected in, agencies connected in a very simple example here. A lot of times, supply chains are much more complex than this. But at the end of the day, hopefully, if you remember one thing about Unified, it's your data collected and enriched, driving business intelligence. So that's it. I'm going to open it up to questions. As always, please feel free to follow us on our social channels, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Check out our website. Or if you have a general marketing question or comment, could be about this webinar, could be about anything in general, please feel free to email marketing@unified.com. So with that said, I will turn it over to questions, and let's see what we have in the queue here. Question number 1 is, how unique is Unified's enriched data in the landscape? Okay. So I assume you're talking about the competitive landscape here. And if you think about the business intelligence competitive landscape, there's really not many people purpose-built for social advertising like us. That is all we do. We don't visualize any data set. We visualize social advertising investment portfolio data and have specifically built an enrichment engine to make sense of that. So if you think of, there's a lot of huge business intelligence companies out there, people like Tableau, or Domo, they will visualize any data. You could be a healthcare company, a law firm, a medical company, whatever it is, they have really amazing visualizations of that data, but they don't have the enrichment engine into it. And ours is specifically in the realm of social advertising. So some of our clients really like those visualization layers. They've been using them for years, but they still want that data enrichment. That's no problem for us. We will actually pipe in the enriched data into whatever visualization layer that you want so that you get the best of both worlds. So pretty unique to us. You might find other companies out there trying to hack it, quote unquote, with something maybe like custom tags. So at the actual raw data level, they're not, for instance, enriching it with the context of what agency it came from or what tool it came from. They're reliant on the user to place a manual tag on each individual element of it. That's not really data enrichment. That's just kind of like reporting lenses. So I definitely wouldn't recommend going that route unless you have 20 extra hours a week to put custom tags on things. Next question. Can you really get down to the level of tools within the enriched data? So I assume you're talking about in a bake-off scenario, if you're running multiple tools, can you actually enrich the data to know which tool it came from? And you absolutely can, whether it is individual buying tools for self-service buyers or different buying partners out there in the world. If you're kind of doing a bake-off for multiple ones, we will connect in any and all of those tools or solutions or partners and provide the enriched data context so that you can track the progress of each of those. Pretty rarely these days does anyone standardize on one tool or one partner forever. What you're finding in the ecosystem is that certain tools or certain partners, if you're in the managed service world, really develop specialties. And maybe, as a brand, you want to tap into that specialty for your holiday campaign, but when Q1 rolls around, you don't really need it anymore. Maybe you are a ice cream brand and you really want to leverage one partner's weather-based optimization for your launch in July when it's really hot out, but you don't really need that for your general holiday marketing push, right? For that, you want a hardcore direct response person. And then when Q1 rolls around, you want to test out some shiny new dynamic product ad feature. The point is, everyone's kind of developing their own shiny new features. What marketers really need is a way to test and connect in all of those with a view from the top so they can easily see, okay, this one's working great, this one's not. Time to swap them out or time to scale up, whatever it might be. So I think that brings us to the end. We're out of time. Hopefully this was really helpful for you to learn a little bit about what is that elusive term you hear about so much, enriched data, and specifically what does it mean in the social marketing ecosystem and why it's really critical for marketers to start thinking about, am I getting just raw data or am I getting enriched data so I can truly drive ROI in my business? Thank you for joining, and again, feel free to check out any of our properties.